11 common mistakes startups make with branding. So branding used to be for big corporations. It was what we always associated with big television ads and campaigns and slogans and logos that everybody could recognize from a mile away. Maybe a jingle and some other things that go into it as well. And we all know those things for major and mega brands that are either international or at least run throughout our entire country. And so we've seen those brands, we recognize those, we'd see them and recognize them right away. But that is sort of the old school way that branding was always done. And small businesses and solopreneurs and entrepreneurs that were just starting businesses never concerned themselves with branding because it was always something that was designed for companies with large budgets and with the need to be able to make an impact using TV and other major advertising platforms that cost so much money. Now that we've sort of democratized all of the advertising with online ads, and literally anybody can get on there any day of the week and start running ads, it's far more important than it ever was because so many things have shifted to online. And so there's a number of shifts that have taken place. Number one, we obviously have all of the online space and all of those platforms where everybody and anybody can advertise. And so it's a completely different medium where we're no longer excluding anybody that doesn't have a massive budget because everybody can take part in it. But in addition to that, people have become a little bit more socially conscious and concerned about the actual brands that they do business with. So personal brands have now become more common than ever. There are a lot of people that are building a personal brand around themselves. And in fact, I've seen articles and guides about how to build a personal brand about yourself, even if you don't have a business. Just as an employee or as somebody that you want to make yourself more employable and attractive to other companies, you can build a personal brand around that as well because we have the opportunity to build out whatever we want on our platforms on social media. And so it's exciting, but it's also at the same time confusing and can be really difficult. So people want to deal increasingly with brands and companies that they align with their values, that they understand, and that they feel like they really know them. And so that's another thing that has really sort of brought branding to the forefront. In addition to that, we have increased competition because now, in addition to the big guys that are advertising with massive budgets, we have all the small players in every niche, every market that are able to advertise and promote as well. And so for us to be able to build a brand is really important now, no matter what business, what size we have, and no matter how big of our footprint. So if we can build out a brand effectively and we can carve out a niche and we can dominate that niche and be able to serve those customers better than everybody else. But the problem is, because branding is relatively new for the little guy, it's largely misunderstood, or at least it's not executed well by a lot of entrepreneurs. So some don't understand really what we need to do about branding, and then some understand it, but the execution just doesn't work out. So it doesn't end up where it should be in terms of its effectiveness. So let's talk about some of the biggest branding mistakes that solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small business owners make and how we can avoid them. The first one is inconsistency across branding elements. And this is it's among the biggest issues because what happens is when we start to use different logos, different colors, different messaging across various platforms and materials, we start to confuse everybody. Customers don't quite understand who we are, what we stand for. It weakens the brand recognition. And oftentimes this isn't because we deliberately set out to try different things. It's because we haven't created one uniform, unique branding kit that has all the stuff in it that we need. So the first step for any entrepreneur, startup, solopreneur, whatever, should be to create a branding kit where you actually have the three main colors that you're going to be using, and you can use different shades of them, but typically you want to stick to about three main colors. You want to have your logo in both a positive and a negative format. So in other words, something that would look really good on a white background and something that would look really good on a dark background. You want both versions. Sometimes the same logo will suffice. Sometimes you need like an inverse color or a white or a black, something like that to make it really stand out. And fonts. So we want to pick a couple of fonts, and in general, same thing. We don't want too many. We want to keep it simple. We want to keep body fonts something that are very readable. And headline fonts can be more display oriented, where they're a little bit thicker, maybe bold or whatever. And if we create this in advance, so we know the color scheme we're going to use, and we have the hex values for all of those colors, and we have the versions of the logos, and we work off of that every single time we create any marketing piece. That is the key to establishing that brand recognition in the beginning and that identity, and then we just need to stick with that. Unfortunately, most people never take that step, so what they end up doing is just, oh, I got to get this thing posted, so let me just grab this logo, and I've got to do that so the text doesn't fit, so I'm just going to change the font to make it fit. When you start to do that, what happens is people get confused. You know, there are brands that you'd recognize if you saw their text written out, even if their logo wasn't there, because it's a particular font they use in a particular style. That's what we eventually want to develop for ourselves. And the other issue with branding is that it's a long-term strategy. So that's another reason that not a lot of entrepreneurs really lean into it, because it isn't something that's going to return sales and profits tomorrow. It's something we need to invest in now, and then down the road, as we get enough of a footprint, it'll start to pay dividends. So that's one of the biggest issues right off the bat. The second thing is disregarding the branding guidelines when we're going across different channels of whatever communication we're doing. So we've created our branding kit, we've got our ideas, we've got our logos, and so every time we post on Facebook, we always use the same stuff. Great. But then we go over to TikTok, we go over to YouTube, we create some, pamphlets or marketing materials that we're going to hand out. And for those, or for our website, the colors are different, the logos are different. It's the same issue. We want uniformity across everything, because when we're able to create that, what happens is every time somebody sees us, it sparks that little recognition in the back of their mind. And over time, they'll get to a point where they recognize who we are just by the way our stuff looks. And that becomes very, very powerful. So we want to make sure as business owners, as entrepreneurs, that not only do we have a set branding kit that we work off of, that we made conscious decisions about what we're going to use, but in addition to that, we're consistent with that across everything that our business ever puts out that is meant to be customer facing or public. We always want that stuff to be the same, so that way we have an opportunity to continue to build on that brand and grow it from there. The third issue, and it's sort of related to the first two, but it's important to bring it up separately because it is actually separate, is to underestimate the value of a strong brand identity. Again, we're sort of in this interesting flux period because 10, 15 years ago, if you didn't have a strong online brand, it wasn't really that big of a deal, right? Companies that had that were better off, but you could survive by just making sales and doing whatever you were doing, running some ads. The competition was far less, and people were far less sophisticated in terms of the way that they viewed branding. Now, we've gotten to a point where that's no longer something that is a nice to do, it's a requirement in order to be successful in business. And so if we come from the old school, or we don't recognize the value and how important that branding is, that is a big deal, because we'll fail to create a clear and compelling brand identity that encapsulates our personality, our values, and our promise to customers. And that's the other element. I've talked a lot about the visual pieces of it, but it's important that the messaging also feeds into the brand. And that's where we come into the fourth issue or mistake that entrepreneurs can make. And that is overcomplicating the brand message. What happens as a business owner is we get really excited about what we do. We get excited about what we offer, our products, our services, and all the people we think we can help. And so what we try to do is open the door to everybody. We try to say, you know what? Yeah, I offer this particular service, and it could be good for literally anybody. I mean, my market is really anybody in the entire world. Well, that might technically be true. You might have something that would appeal to everybody if you were able to reach them in their space. But the problem with that sort of mentality from a marketing standpoint is that you end up becoming a middle of the roader that isn't perfect for any one particular market niche. And so you get carved up by other specialists. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that we're experts at dog training. So we create a dog training guide and we say, this is the best dog training guide. It's from all these years of experience. We really know what we're doing. It works on every breed. It works on every, like boy and girl dogs and young and old dogs, whatever. Fantastic. The problem is when we try to market that and we're marketing to somebody who owns a poodle and our competitor has a poodle training guide, what's going to happen is the poodle owner is going to look and they're going to say, well, okay, well, let's see, I could get dog training or I could get poodle training and I own a poodle. So the poodle training obviously makes more sense. And then somebody makes a German Shepherd training and then Shih Tzu training or whatever it is. And so each niche business, each niche market carves up our larger pie. And so while we were looking at it from the idea of possibility and all these other people we could potentially serve, we end up serving almost nobody because we get carved up by competitors who specialized. If we have a message or we have an idea or a product or a service that will apply to lots of groups, it's smartest to start simple and start focused and then expand it out from there. Dominate one particular niche, own that, and then build it out from there. So where this fits into overcomplicating the brand message is that our messaging needs to be really clear. And what happens is we try sometimes to convey too many ideas or features simultaneously. So the parallel of this is you have a product that is really good for dog training and also dog biting and dog dieting and dog exercise. And it's also good for, getting dogs to come on command and roll over and do tricks and all these other things. And so you create this branding message and we say, well, geez, it's the be all end all of any other dog training. Anything you want to do with your dog, my product will do it. It's too confusing. It doesn't make sense. Nobody thinks that we can be an expert at every single thing. So what we want to do is pick one narrow focus. Do you have a dog that bites? I have a training guide that will help you with dogs that bite. Boom. Okay, so somebody that has a dog that bites now wants that. Now they might open it up and realize, hey, wait a minute, I can teach my dog all this other stuff too. And that's great. And we can even potentially market to all of those segments. But we need to do it in a targeted fashion for each one. So with our branding, how this circles back around is with our exact branding for what we're doing for our company, for our product, for our service. We want to have something that's really tight and focused in terms of the overall thing that we stand for. That when we convey it, it makes instant sense to our market. It has to be specific and clear enough that we're able to get the message across, and it needs to be simple enough that it doesn't get confusing because there's too many things that we're trying to convey. And so if we're able to do that, it makes for a very focused, very powerful branding campaign. The fifth mistake that entrepreneurs and business owners make in branding is neglecting the target audience. Oftentimes as product owners, as business owners, we offer a product or a service and we get very excited about that product or service and what it can do for people. And that enthusiasm is great. But what ends up happening is if we fall too much in love with our product instead of falling in love with our customer, then we're too worried about trying to fit the customers into the product instead of the other way around. If we have branding elements that aren't landing, if we have things about our audience, if we start talking to our customers and we thought the fact that we were eco-friendly was our number one selling point, we're so excited about this. And every person we talk to says, you know what? You guys have the best quality widget on the planet. That's the reason I do business with you. We might still want to be eco-friendly, but we probably want to focus more on the fact of our product quality as our branding because that's the thing that's getting customers in the door. And so we always want to have sort of one ear open where we're listening to what our customers have to say. We're listening to feedback. And this could be in the forms of, if we have an open forum or any membership area where we can, interact with people. Customer support is a great place to get feedback of this sort. Sales, if we're doing any kind of sales where we're interacting with people, whether it's in person or by phone or even in chat, and we're getting back and forth conversations and engagement, that's where we really want to start to collect that information and see if the branding that we've got resonates. There's nothing wrong with shifting and making changes. When we set up to create a brand and we have our branding stuff working, it doesn't mean that's forever. We can always change, we can always shift, but we want to choose and decide and go forward with one thing. And then if we need to pivot, we can always do that. But that's basically the idea of how we want to do it. So we want to make sure that we research and understand the market, what matters to them, and what's valuable to them. And those are the elements that we really want to focus on. The sixth thing that I see as issues in branding is excessive focus on cleverness or trends. I've seen people try to create branding slogans or branding, logos or whatever, and it was totally confusing and didn't make any sense because they were trying to piggyback on something that was either a growing trend that's out there. And by the way, trends are going to come and go. So it's never a good idea to follow a trend as your branding. That's just a general rule. But the other thing is, it's better to be accurate and clever and value-based, where we communicate our value to customers, than it is to be clever. So if there's a way to do a play on words or alliteration or something that will make it work and it fits in, fantastic. If it doesn't, ditch the cleverness and go with the thing that actually makes the most sense and resonates with the market. That is the most important thing in terms of building a customer base and a brand that will endure. If we just blindly follow design trends and we don't consider the long-term relevance, then unfortunately the other issue is when those trends go out, our brand might look dated as well. The seventh thing is choosing an unengaging name. Now, this isn't a death knell, so I'm putting this in there, but it doesn't mean that if your name isn't great, it can't work. It can. There are some weird name companies and stuff, and they still catch on, and they're still successful because their products are really good, their marketing's really good, everything else. But in general, if you haven't already decided and picked a name, it's smart to pick a name that makes sense for what you're offering. So you want one in general that's relatively brief. You want it to be short and small, catchy if possible, easily to remember, and easily pronounced, because that makes it more viral ready, if you will. It's easier to share and talk about if people understand how to pronounce it, if it's something easy to remember, and it's catchy and it's simple. If it's too complicated, too wordy, or it doesn't make a lot of sense, then you can lose sort of that in translation and lose some of the viral effect that it could have when people want to share the message and talk to each other about it because they're excited about what you offer. The eighth mistake is neglecting the visual identity. So we started this very episode talking a lot about the visuals. We live in a very visual world, especially now, especially in the online world. Everything has gone the way of image and video. So we want something that is relatively appealing visually. So you can choose whatever style that works for you, works for your audience, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be modern, but we want something that's visually appealing and that will resonate with our audience. So it looks good and it just has that feel when you look at it that it looks professional. We definitely want that. We want to appear as though we know what we're doing and that we're professionals that are building a brand. The ninth mistake that people make is copying competitors. We see something, we're like, wow, that's pretty good. So then we decide what we're going to do is sort of do a play off of that or kind of take pieces of what they did. There's nothing wrong with getting inspiration from competitors or other industries or other brands or anywhere. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it makes a lot of sense. But trying to mimic a successful company instead of developing a unique brand identity is just an also-ran strategy that's ultimately doomed to failure because they're probably going to be better at it than we are. Since they're already doing it, we have to copy them. The 10th mistake that I see in branding a lot is when there's messaging involved, the focus is on features and instead of storytelling, right? The best brands, the most effective brands are ones that tell stories. because stories are the things that we connect with. Stories are the things that we remember. We forget bullet points. We forget features. We even forget benefits if there's a list of them. But we don't forget stories. We can all recall a story we heard that moved us, that made us feel a particular way, good, bad, or indifferent. If we got emotional about it, we remember it. And so emphasizing the technical details instead of creating an emotional connection is not the right way to do it. We want to focus on that emotional connection and brand storytelling. If we have customers that have great stories, we want to use those with their permission, of course. If we have our own personal story that led us to create the brand or the product, those are stories we want to share. Those are all things that we want to make sure that we do so we can connect with everybody emotionally and build that brand. And the 11th thing is ignoring customer feedback. Let's say we have our brand set up and we think we're in love with it. I mean, everything's great. We spent a lot of time. We got the right color scheme, got the right messaging, got the right logo, got the right slogan. And we start getting some feedback from customers. Hey, we're a little confused about this. Oh, I didn't really like that. Oh, what's going on with this new logo thing that you've got or whatever. We have to put our ego aside and we have to recognize it's not if any one customer says anything, that's not a big deal. But if there's a trend, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to customer feedback and that we're recognizing what they value about our brand and what they don't. So we can continue to move toward emphasizing the things they really value and away from the things that they don't care that much about. That will help us develop a stronger, more effective brand, that resonates with our target audience and contributes to long-term success. So the takeaway here is that every business and every entrepreneur needs to consider branding in their marketing now. It's just plain and simple. And if we just take a little time to do it right, we can avoid the common mistakes that people make that limit our impact and our sales. By being deliberate in our branding, we can create a consistent image that resonates with our target market and helps us carve out a niche that we can dominate. And that is the key to long-term success.